episode of the Baseball Empress podcast, a show for baseball fans by a baseball fan. I'm Stephanie, your host, and with us today we will have a special guest for a segment, my son Eli. He's going to discuss how we can help America's youth become more interested in baseball again. Also, back by popular demand, is my daughter Janèe, here with us again during this episode.
Hey.
Today we're going to discuss the latest Cardinal news, a Know Your History segment with Yogi Berra, and a conversation about catchers. AL Central preseason topics, America's youth in baseball, Bartolo Colon. So, jumping right into the latest Cardinal news. So again, Yadier Molina was in the news, and what he said was he wants to go into the Hall of Fame as the best catcher ever. Now, there's a lot of debate about where Yadi ranks in baseball history as the best catcher. Most people have him about third, and usually the reason for that is his mediocre offensive numbers. And while that, may be the case, I do think that most of what Yadi does is difficult to quantify. So if you look at it in a statistic form or on paper, and you don't watch a lot of what Yadi does day to day in games and know how he's such a leader on the field, it is difficult to understand his impact on the game. But I really like the way that he just came out and said he wants to be the best. I mean, that's what we want to hear from our players, and that's what special elite athletes always say, is they want to be the best. That's what their goal is. That's what they strive to do. You really don't want to hear somebody say, I'm okay with like third or fourth. I'm good with that. So speaking of catchers, also on May 12th would have been Yogi Berra's 95th birthday. And if you don't know Yogi Berra, he's actually from the Hill neighborhood here in St. Louis. Some people say he's the greatest catcher or one of the greatest catchers in that conversation because he's got the most championships for a catcher. Yogi was quite the unique personality. From what I understand and hear, he was a really nice guy. And let's just kind of review his career stats a little bit.
So Yogi had a long career in MLB, so he played 19 years, most of which were with the New York Yankees, and then he spent 1 year with the Mets. He's won 3 MVPs. He had a career batting average of .285, a WAR of 59.5, and was an all-star several times throughout his career. If you've ever seen the clip of Jackie Robinson stealing home, he's the catcher that essentially Jackie Robinson stole on. He's also very popular for his Yogi-isms, but he was a good catcher in and of his own right.
And so just for comparison, so far in Molina's career, he has a 40.1 WAR. He has a .282 batting average, on base percentage 333, slugging 405, so an OPS of 738. And he's won 2 world championships with the Cardinals, a Silver Slugger award. He's a 9-time All-Star, 9-time Gold Glove winner, and a 4-time Platinum Glove winner. So their numbers are comparable. But what truly set Yogi apart really was his Yogi-isms. Mm-hmm. And I know Janèe is a big fan of Yogi-isms. So if you aren't familiar with Yogi-isms, we can give you a couple.
There are a couple that you kind of hear all the time, like it ain't over till it's over. It's like deja vu all over again, things like that. One of my favorite ones is you can observe a lot by watching. That's
it's true.
That's a good one. Also one that's related to baseball is he said baseball is 90% mental, the other half is physical. I feel that, Yogi. It is. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It is it's mental and it's physical.
Mm-hmm, the other half.
And the other half of it is.
Math apparently is not a strong suit.
Right. A nickel ain't worth a dime anymore. No one goes there nowadays. It's too crowded. Y'all watch out with this corona. Do the social distancing. 6 feet, please. And when you come to a fork in the road, take it.
Take the fork. You come, you got to take it.
Yeah. Either way, it's fine.
Mm-hmm. So this kind of got me thinking this week with Yadi and Yogi. Even their nicknames are similar, I guess.
The wise.
But really, like, what is the true value of a catcher? I mean, it's kind of difficult to quantify in a lot of ways, especially Yadi. And I didn't watch Yogi play. I'm not that old. And we talk a lot about the offensive contribution of a catcher, right? He's in the lineup every day. And just like anyone else who's in the lineup every day, we talk about his offensive contribution. But is that really how we should value a catcher? I mean, there's also... their ability to play defense is really their main contribution. You know, you take any pitcher who's played most of their career in the National League, and you never talk about what their batting average was unless it's just like, you know, randomly high for a pitcher. There's always that quote, for a pitcher qualifier on there. And so you think about like a Madison Bumgarner is always one that comes to mind. Zach Greinke for sure. But is that really how we are going to remember those players? I mean, pitchers we're not. We're going to remember how they pitched, like what a great pitcher they were. And specifically we're talking about starters here. So why, if a pitcher pitches well, he's effective, he gets outs, he gets wins, not a lot of runs are scored, or he at least leaves his team in a position to win when he leaves a game. Why is it any different for a catcher then? Why, for a catcher, are we so concerned about their offense? Because they do just as much work during a game as a pitcher. Actually, they do more work in a game because very rarely are pitchers throwing complete games, especially now. Catchers, on the other hand, they're playing complete games every single day. And every time that ball is pitched, they're throwing it back.
I mean, I think it boils down to when you think about the great catchers and when you think about Yadi, like what are some characteristics that you want in those guys? I want somebody who is the peak of stability. Like he's in the game, he knows what's going on, he's a force behind the plate, balls are not getting past him, he's not erratic in his behavior, he's reliable, he's trustworthy. More specifically, the pitchers trust him. We've all seen those awkward situations where pitchers shake off pitches that are called by the catchers all the time, and and they have all these mound visits, and you're like, you can tell that these pitchers are not trusting whatever catcher is catching that day, or maybe they're not on the same page. You rarely see that with a Yadi or with, you know, some of these other veteran guys. So those characteristics, you know, you can't necessarily boil it down to stats specifically, but I mean, they are the commanders of the defense, specifically the infield, and their contributions are invaluable, especially when you have someone who can rein in like a whole kind of class of young pitchers like Yadi does consistently. Like every year or two, whenever the Cardinals have a mass influx of young pitchers, he like brings them under his wing and is teaching them, you know, how things are gonna go, and they're like, yeah, Yadi is the best, we're gonna listen to him. And
he's really like another pitching coach.
Yeah, and I mean to have that on the field, like,
right. How do you quantify that?
Right.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. Again, you know, with Yadi, I mean, just a quick rundown of the things that we as Cardinal fans know that he does every single game. He's calling the game. He's calling every single pitch, and in case you don't know, not every catcher does that. A lot of times pitchers are called by the managers in the dugout, or the pitching coaches are involved. And they send signs to the catcher, and then the catcher sends signs to the pitchers. It's not always just the catchers, or there's a pregame plan that's put together. And I'm sure the Cardinals put together a pregame plan, but Yadi is the one who calls those pitches. Yadi's the one that calls that game. And that's why pitchers do not shake him off and do not shake off his calls, because if you're a real dedicated Cardinal fan, you remember that game years ago with Shelby Miller. I don't know what got into him that day, but he was not feeling Yadi's calls, and he kept shaking them off, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse, to the point where Yadi just kind of, did the little, just come on and throw sign, throw whatever you want, Shelby, let's go, let's just pitch. And it did not go well for Shelby Miller.
Burned.
He got rocked that game. And really, we were sitting there shaking our heads going, this is not going to go well. It never goes well when pitchers shake off Yadi. And it did not go well for Shelby that game. And I don't know whether Shelby Miller learned his lesson or not, but I'm not sure if he's even pitching in baseball right now.
Well, he wasn't on the team the next year. I know that
He
much.
sure wasn't. If you're familiar with Jordan Hicks, you all know that he throws 103, 104, 105 miles per hour sometimes. Those foul tips, they go off of Yadi's body. We all remember his injury from a couple years ago off 103 mile per hour foul tip. Those balls hitting his hand repeatedly, even with the glove. That hurts. That's a lot to take. And then at the same time, he's directing the defense. And I don't just mean the infield, the outfielders too. Every pitch, he's moving them because he knows what's getting ready to be thrown. He knows the batters. He knows the entire game so well that he is literally like having a coach on the field. And, with the whole new rule, what was that, last year that they did the field visit limit, most of the time, the manager's directing that, the pitching coach is directing that when there's a mound visit. But with Yadi, the Cardinals trust him. If he needs to go talk to one of those pitchers, go talk to one of the pitchers. And he will not hesitate to go out there and talk to them. Right. And it really is impactful. It's and they listen. They listen. They know. I mean, Adam Wainwright knows. He's played with Yadi his entire career. Carlos Martinez knows. Again, every pitcher knows. Jack Flaherty, Cy Young candidate going forward, knows. All of our pitching staff will tell you about Molina. And the whole league really knows the importance that he plays to the Cardinals on the field and off the field. And you can't quantify leadership. And that's what Yadi brings to the table. He teaches so much. He tries to learn as much as he can. And it really is, it's kind of poetry in motion just to watch him and watch all the things that he does. You can see his mind working. Right. And the physical beating that catchers take on a day-to-day basis is significant. And then we expect them to go out here and hit 300 every season with 30 home runs or something.
Yadi is not he does not take days off.
No.
People tell him to take days off.
Right.
And if he could play all 182 games, he would absolutely play all 182 games, and Matt Wieters and whoever else is the backup will just have to ride the pine because they would never get any playing time.
Which is why our younger catching prospects keep getting traded away because they're not getting playing opportunities. And, it's really like Michael Jordan, in a way, you think about it. Michael never wanted to sit on the bench. He never wanted to come out of the game, even if he was sick and not feeling well. And that's how Molina is. He never wants to take a day off.
Unless he is literally going to the hospital.
Right, exactly.
That is it.
Exactly. And don't get me wrong, Yadi has decent offensive numbers.
Especially the past several years.
Yeah, he's had some really good offensive seasons, and he's very, very clutch. And the Cardinal players talked about it recently on social media. He's definitely one of the most clutch player on our team. And he's one of the most clutch players in baseball because he is great at making contact and he's great at directing the ball. And because he knows the game so well, he knows where to place a ball to try and score a runner. He knows the speed that we may have on the bases. He knows if there's no one on the base, that's the time that he may try to hit a home run. Because, speed's just not one of his gifts that he has.
Right.
And most catchers are not fast runners. So it really is interesting the way that we think about catchers and we try to compare them and we try to rate them. It seems like offense always comes up, and I just really don't think that's really. I mean, it's kind of like a nice bonus, kind of like if your pitcher hits well when they bat. I mean, it's great, but that's not even close to their main function, and that's not really what you're looking for in a catcher. So I guess I say all that just to say I'm kind of tired of hearing that argument against Molina. He's actually a very clutch hitter. In fact, when we have runners on base late in a game that we're trying to tie up, I actually am happy to see Molina come to the plate. Catchers, very important. Moving on, wanted to do a little segment on the AL Central preseason topics. So this is getting a little bit complicated to kind of keep talking about it in this format just because the proposal that baseball has currently is to do these 3 10-team divisions. So I'm talking about the AL Central, but if we have a 2020 season, these teams will be up against different teams and they won't necessarily be in the division to compare, to compete against each other. But we're going to continue with this because this is what we know until something else is actually announced officially. So in the AL Central this year, the Twins, Indians, White Sox are expected to be the best teams, with the Twins, I think pretty much by far, again, appearing to being the strongest team in that division. They really are loaded, and they appear to strengthen their defense and lineup this offseason by adding Josh Donaldson. So that'll be interesting to kind of watch how, if they're able to compete as well as they did last year and not run into the Yankees or somebody in the playoffs that can stop them. The White Sox added Yasmani Grandal, Dallas Keuchel, Gio Gonzalez, Edwin Encarnacion. So they're not playing around either.
Right. They've already got a talented squad over there with Tim Anderson and some other guys. So they are on the hunt. They are on the come up for sure.
That's right. They're tired of everybody talking about the Cubs all the freaking time in Chicago. And we want to go back to where they're the story again. So those are strong additions for pitching and for their lineup. So I think it'll be great to see how they're able to compete, and especially with some of those veterans that they've added. Royals have Mike Matheny as their manager.
How about that?
Yeah. Well, that's unfortunate. We're sorry for that.
Not really.
Yeah, I mean,
y'all get if you are a Royals fan and you live in Missouri, you get the same coverage for the Cardinals you saw.
Yeah, y'all know what's up with that.
Yeah, you know what you're dealing with, so good luck.
Yeah, have fun.
Godspeed.
Right. Tigers, not projected to do well this year.
Crickets.
Yeah. That's all we got to say about that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a special treat today. My son Eli is here to discuss America's youth and their interest and involvement in playing baseball and being a baseball fan. I think it's really important that we get today's youth more interested in baseball because they're not as interested as previous generations, and it may impact the game in the future. So Eli had some ideas. So Eli, take it away.
So my first conversation is why kids are broken apart from the game. Well, most kids are into video games instead of going to a baseball game and watching the game because so many of them are distracted by their phones or their tablets, so they have so many other things that they could do that are electronic and new. Kids loved baseball back then when there was nothing else to entertain them, such as video games. Back then, the only other thing to do was to play an outdoor game. Personally, the last time I went to a game, it was pretty hot and it was hard to focus on the game. Mostly that's not the reason for kids being distracted, but I am actually into the game. That's probably why my mom let me be on this podcast. So, my second conversation is about bringing baseball to kids. Since kids are occupied with their technology and video games, we could make more baseball video games, specifically VR, because it would give kids an actual feeling of the game. If you don't know what VR is, it's basically virtual reality. You get a special type of goggles, you put it on your head, and you can basically see a little bit better. And if you move around, you can see more of the setting. When kids play a video game like baseball that they have the materials to do in real life, they can be inspired to do them in their backyard, because if in the video game they learn the same rules for in real life. So they know how to play already, and they somewhat know what it looks like in real life. It is possible that some major leaguers were inspired by older video games to play baseball. I personally love the game a lot, and I really do hope that the other kids who are listening to this episode to be inspired by this to try out the game and hopefully like it, so our future generation can continue America's beloved game.
All right. Thank you, Eli. Good job. Okay, so Eli had some good ideas for getting kids interested in baseball in America. And I really do think this is a key issue for Major League Baseball. I know it's something that Rob Manfred has, talked about. They've tried to institute some programs and some connections between Major League Baseball and youth teams and getting more kids involved. Really, it's just involvement and familiarization with Major League Baseball and youth, because kids have so many things that are distracting them, so many ways their attention can go. I mean, so many video games. They're got so much to do with school these days, and a lot of them do play sports. But honestly, the NFL and the NBA have done a much better job marketing and keeping up with youth and making sure that their product is front and center. And baseball just has not done a good job with that. They've really taken it for granted, because for so many years, kids were out there on the ball fields in the heart of America, playing ball. And that's just not what kids are doing these days. They are starting to do a little bit better job, at least on social media, of marketing some of the younger players, I feel like, during this quarantine. But they really do need to continue it. I mean, there's great young players in the game. There's dynamic young players in the game who are exciting to watch. We've got players like Mike Trout who really aren't into the whole marketing front and center, bigger than life personality. But we've got a lot of players who are.
It's worth noting that, so there's this dichotomy that exists, right? Like, we got kids who, we all know that kids need to be physically active. Like, they need that 60 minutes a day. So you got one end of the spectrum of kids who, maybe aren't getting that physical activity at all, and they're not playing baseball because they're not interested in, they think it's boring, whatever, all those reasons that kids give why they don't like to watch or play baseball. Then you've got the other end of the spectrum of kids who play literally year round and no break. Mm-hmm. And MLB they try to address both of those issues. Like, they try to, do the hit, play, run program and like RBI stuff in the inner city and stuff like that. And then they've also, late I might add, come into the picture and say, hey, all of y'all kids who are playing, 9 months out of the year, like, this isn't great for your arm. This isn't great, for baseball. Like, we want We want to see well-rounded athletes. Like all these athletes, like your Chris Archers or your Mike Trouts, or people who grew up playing multiple sports for years. That's what helped them become better baseball players in general. So yeah. I mean, MLB they need to do a better job of addressing both of those issues going forward, just for the sustainability of the game. Like, we got to get kids playing baseball and interested in baseball, and there are certain things that we can do to help promote that. And then we also need to incorporate some balance here and be like, okay, y'all can't be playing, every weekend for 9 months and expect that you're going to be healthy enough to play ball.
It's hard to take your kids to a game. It's expensive. And even if you're watching on TV, again, those games are late. It'd be great. They used to, before all ballparks had stadium lights, a lot of those games used to be played in the afternoon. And, I mean, we've all heard many a story of people coming home from school and, turning on the radio to listen to a ball game, going to the ballpark after school, or watching it on TV in the afternoon. I know I personally used to come home and turn on WGN in the afternoon and watch the Cubs. I knew a lot about the Cubs. I wasn't a Cubs fan, but I knew a lot about the Cubs and baseball because they didn't have lights even when I was a kid in Wrigley Field, and so they played a lot of their games in the afternoon. That was really fun, listening to Harry Carey and all that, and watching baseball in the afternoon. So that might be something that baseball needs to consider as well. In addition to just a general casual fan appeal, and it might actually be better for the players as well, is like fewer regular season games, not by a lot, but by a few, and maybe adding another round to the playoffs, because so many people just like to watch playoff sports and not necessarily regular season sports. So MLB definitely needs to do some work there, and whatever you can do personally to get your kids or other kids around you in the community involved in baseball and loving baseball like we all do, that would be great. So in case you missed it, Bartolo Colon had some comments this week about playing another season, which he'll turn 47 on May 24th. So he wants to pitch another season. Very interesting. And I think, Janèe, you can speak to this a little too, about he really wants to be a legend in the Dominican, and I think he already kind of has that status there.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to have visited the Dominican Republic several times, and driving through some of the smaller towns and stuff like that. If you're with people who are native to the Dominican or spend a lot of time in the Dominican, they will tell you pretty much all of the main players that come from every city that you visit. And as we know, there are a lot of Dominican players, so pretty much every town that you go through, someone that you can readily recognize their name, they're from that town. And I remember driving through a couple of towns, and one of the people that were with us were like, oh, this is where, this is the town where Bartolo Colon is from. And I think that's his biggest thing, him turning 47. He's all about this legacy that he's trying to leave, specifically for Dominican players. Like most Dominican pitchers, he looks up to Pedro Martinez, who was elected to the Hall of Fame several years ago. So he wants to, solidify his legacy up there with Pedro. And, Bartolo is a very fun person to watch play.
Doesn't exactly look like an athlete.
Doesn't look like an athlete. He's one of those, like, when he comes to spring training, he's the one that's going to have to lose the 10 pounds or the 15 pounds or however, to pass the physical or whatever that he's got to do. But, the man can pitch.
He can pitch. And he's been doing it a long time. And, his hitting is entertaining. Mm-hmm. And and he hit that one home run. I think he said he watches it like at least once every day.
I mean, I don't blame him.
It was a good, solid home run,
right.
too.
You can't take that away from him.
No, you can't. And I'll post some of Bartolo's highlights on the Instagram page at the Baseball Empress. But he really is unique, and he's a fun personality, fun to watch, effective pitcher. So if he's able to come back and pitch again, I'm going to watch.
Absolutely.
And thank you for being on the show again this week.
No problem.
You can follow the show on Instagram at The Baseball Empress and at thebaseballempress.com. Thanks for listening, and remember, this ain't your grandma's baseball podcast, and it sure as hell ain't your grandpa's.